What a beautiful beginning. Thank you. Welcome to the Boulder Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I am Reverend Lydia Ferrante Roseberry, and I'm the minister of this beautiful, beloved congregation. And I'm joined today by Service Associate Gloria Perlstein. Our music, as you've seen, is by the Fellowship Choir today, under the direction of Tad Koryeth and the accompanist Julie Morris, who's over there, who's not by the piano right now. And our hymn leader today will be Mary Stackpole. And of course, we couldn't do what we're doing without our fabulous tech team who are keeping our Zoomies connected and keeping us also connected. And that this week is Larry Sherwood, Boone Kowalchuk, and Karen Griglak on Zoom. Thank you. This morning, I invite you to listen very closely to our welcome words and imagine how it might change the way you would interact with people you are just getting to know. You are all welcome here today. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, skin tones, shapes, sizes, gifts, and challenges that come together in your uniqueness, you are welcome here. In all the ways you experience and express gender, you are welcome here. In all the ways you make your living, in all the places you are from, you are welcome here. With all of the traditions that inform your spiritual life, you are welcome here. And whether you come with laughter in your heart today or tears, you are welcome here. You are invited to join us with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. We welcome you today. I do have a special introduction today, and I'm trying to see if Apollo is here in the sanctuary. There's Apollo. Apollo is a new staff member, Apollo Blue. I'm here to introduce you to. And they grew up as part of Jefferson Unitarian Church, and as an older teenager began teaching the preschoolers in the congregation. During the pandemic, Apollo taught 4th and 5th graders and the 6th grade Neighboring Faiths program on Zoom. We were actually delighted to know that Apollo was available when she moved to Boulder and had to leave her job at Jefferson Unitarian. Apollo is an anthropology student at Metro State. She's also a disability rights activist and an actor with Family Theater Company. Gosh, I'm so excited to get to know you, I have to say. Their greatest passions are theater, art, writing, and teaching kids. She's very excited to join the fellowship as our 2nd to 5th grade School of the Spirit teacher. So welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. And do you want to say a word or two?
Video.
There it is. There's the mic.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to be part of your congregation and teach your kids. Thank you again for the warm welcome. I'm really looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you. So glad you're here. And now, we'll invite all those kiddos to go out with Apollo and into their classes. Thank you, Apollo. You may remember way back in the before times when the service would end and everybody would stand and we'd hold hands or link arms. Yes, I'm seeing some like, yes, please, right? Well, we've been in COVID low status for a while, so we're going to start that again yes, I know, with our COVID caveats, which I think I like that, COVID caveats. We will be inviting people to hold hands or touch elbows or put your hand on a shoulder during the benediction. And if you don't want to do this, that is perfectly okay. What we ask you to do is just go like this, and then that is the symbol for no touch, please. And we will only do this when COVID is low in our area. So when we switch, if we switch to medium and high, we'll go back to our, God's frozen chosen stance. So we'll start that today. I just wanted to give you a little heads up. Also today we'll be doing joys and concerns a little bit differently. You'll see some paper and pencils on some of the seats this morning. If you have a joy or a concern that you do want shared, please write it down with your name and place it in the offering plate. Zoomies, you can write yours down in the chat as well, but put J and C before you write so that I'll know that that's what it's for, joys and concerns. Gloria will perform some magic, and she will lift up those joys and concerns out of the offering plate, and then I will weave them into a pastoral prayer this morning. So that's how we're going to do joys and concerns. And we'll see how it goes. Now, I'm talking to my fellow procrastinators, because I'm one, but not about this year. It's almost time for the leadership of the congregation to create next year's budget, and we cannot do it without hearing from all of you. We are currently at $336,000, which is amazing, but our goal is $500,000, so we do have a bit of a ways to go this year. I've been hearing that 60 or so of you haven't yet pledged, which if you do or when you do, that will give us a much clearer indication of guidance for creating our budget for the coming year. And I know this fellowship means so much to all of you. And I also know that it takes your dedication and your pledges of financial support to keep us going. So if you haven't already done so, please make sure you get your pledge in. I will sleep better at night as the pledges come in. I now want to invite Annie Liggett to come forward and share a little bit about what the fellowship means to her.
I feel like I'm ready to bare my soul here. In thinking about why I pledge, I realized I am one of those religiously wounded people. I was raised in what I call quasi-Catholic. My mom was a staunch Irish Catholic until she married my dad outside of the church, so she was excommunicated. None of us 5 kids were baptized Catholic, but Mom took us kids to Holy Angels Church anyway on Sundays, despite my dad's hatred of Catholicism. One of my earliest shame memories was sitting in church while everybody went up to receive communion, except us. I was sure everybody thought we were sinners. I tried to be invisible. I was an outsider, an intruder, and thus began what I believe was my lifelong struggle with belonging, feeling that I belonged. Over the next 40 years or so, I dabbled in many non-traditional New Age and Eastern religions, a few intentional communities, including living at a Hindu yoga ashram. But deep down, I never felt I belonged. In 1999, I left a long-term relationship in California and returned to Boulder, where I had previously lived. I'd left behind my home, my dogs, my psychology practice, my community. I had no home and no job. And it was Karen Sheldon, whom some of you may remember as a member here, who suggested I check out the UU Fellowship meeting at the Boulder Masonic Temple at that time. So I did, and I became a member in 2001. I joined because I needed community. Well, things changed fairly soon after that. We bought the Lafayette building. We grew rapidly. Reverend Catherine retired. And things changed even more. And I noticed I was reverting back to that old feeling of being an outsider again. All these new people, all these changes, and I felt alienated for a couple of years here. But I never missed a payment to both my annual and my building fund pledges. I had some ownership in this place. It was this commitment to pledging that kept me tethered to now what is our beloved fellowship. And with time, a feeling of belonging began to grow for me. Every Sunday when Reverend Lydia would say, "You are welcome here," I would hear those words as if for the first time. And then I would consciously try to let those words sift down from my brain to my heart. It was like two entities fighting inside of me. The little kid who felt such shame in church for not belonging, and the grown-up me who was committed to building my sense of belonging by volunteering and pledging. I pledge because this fellowship has taught me over and over that I really do belong. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Ani. Well, if this is one of your first times here, we're really glad you found us and hope that whether you're here in person or virtually, you can feel the warmth and love and commitment of this congregation. Each Sunday is different. Everybody should come back a few times to really get to know us. Those on Zoom can check out the links in the chat to help you get connected. And those in person, you can chat with each other to get connected or go to the welcome table and learn things out there. Everyone on Zoom is welcome to stay for casual conversation after the service in your little Zoom room. And here in person, we'll have coffee hour in the fellowship hall. If there's any new visitors on Zoom who'd like to introduce themselves in the chat, please do. It's a good way for us to build connections that way. And here in the sanctuary, please take a moment to turn around, say hello to somebody, maybe somebody you've never met before. Y'all can keep up that good energy in Fellowship Hall after the service, all right? I loved it. I loved it. If you have a chalice at home, feel free to light it now and put in the chat where you are lighting your chalice. And we'll light our fellowship chalice here, and I invite everyone to say the words together. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. And now I'll sing our bowl again, inviting you into a few moments of silence and see what you can be listening to even in the silence.
I don't think of myself as a mystic, but I have had a mystical experience of the kind that Alan Watts just described. Before I tell you about that, I'm going to talk about the vulnerability that can arise when people share such experiences. Laura Hershey wrote about that vulnerability in her poem called Telling. Here are some excerpts from that poem. What you risk telling your story. You will bore them. Your voice will break. No one will understand. You will park yourself forever on the outside, your differentness once and for all revealed. Or someone, somewhere, will tell their own story, risking everything. So here's my story. About 25 years ago, my family was living in Gun Barrel. We were right behind Celestial Seasonings. Our younger child was then about 6 years old, and one afternoon, the two of us walked to the nearby playground. While the children were playing on the swings and other equipment, I sat on a bench, enjoying the warm, sunny day, the blue sky, and the sight of many kids enjoying themselves. All of a sudden, I had the sensation that I was no longer a separate individual person. Instead, I felt part of and unified with everything I could see. The kids and adults at the playground itself, the trees and the grass around us, the sky, and the mountains to the west. Everything seemed like one unified whole, W-H-O-L-E. It felt peaceful and wonderful and somehow right. I wasn't expecting that shift in perception. I hadn't done anything to bring it on. It just happened. And I have no idea how long that altered state lasted. It could have been a few seconds. It could have been a few minutes. And then I was back in my everyday mind, seeing myself as a separate being and seeing the rest of the world as out there and not me. I think we went home shortly afterwards and I cooked dinner. So what did this experience mean? Why did I have it? I simply don't know. And maybe that's okay. Sri Chinmoy, who was an Indian-born spiritual leader who taught meditation around the world from the mid-1960s until the early 2000s, gave this advice. He said, "Study mysticism if you want to. It will give your heart joy, your mind inspiration, and your life a true, fulfilling, and soulful assurance. But do not try to define it. Do not try to interpret it. If you try to define mysticism, you are bound to fail. If you try to interpret mysticism, you will most deplorably fail." And I think that's because the mind or consciousness that tries to figure out mystical experiences is not the same mind or consciousness that has those experiences. So I don't try to figure it out, but I do have an abiding interest in people's mystical experiences, and I will remember that amazing afternoon as long as my memory lasts.
Good morning. The first hymn we're going to share together this morning is in your gray hymnal. The number is 398, To See the World. Tad is going to play it through for us once, and then we'll sing it together twice. Again, the number is 398, and I invite you to stand as you are willing and able.
Each week, we remind ourselves of the abundance in our lives and this community by giving half of our plate away to those organizations that share our values. Today's half plate will go to the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's Emergency Response Fund. This fund supports the UUSC's work with refugees and asylum seekers from Ukraine, most of whom are women and children. The fund is dedicated to providing resources to connect asylum seekers and refugees with legal representation so they can navigate the immigration processes in nations that are around Ukraine and in the United States. You can text your half-plate donation to the number on the screen, or if you're at the fellowship today, you can place a donation in the offering plate as it passes. If you'd like to donate specifically to the UUSC, you can make out checks to UUSC Emergency Response Fund, or you can donate online to www.uusc.org/Ukraine. Please give generously as you so often do. And today, you can take one of the, if you have a joy or concern, you can take one of the pieces of paper that are on the chairs, write your joy or concern, and put that in the offering plate as it passes. Or you can write it in the chat if you're on Zoom. And now, as our musical reflection begins, we invite you to reflect upon and write into the chat, if you're on Zoom, your answer to this question. What role, if any, have mystical experiences played in your life?
For the work of this fellowship, bringing love and reason and compassion and justice into the world, and for our work in tandem with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, doing the same worldwide, we dedicate our efforts and our offerings. Well, this service was a request from Sue Reddick. I'm not sure I see Sue here this morning, is she? Oh, there she is. Hi, Sue. in the back corner there, hidden. So I want to thank you, Sue, for requesting this, but also given Gloria's quote from Sri Chinmoy, I think I'm kind of set up to fail here this morning. But I have to say, honestly, I find it true on many Sundays that when I try to articulate with spoken word what are deeply held experiences in my body, it's a challenge each and every Sunday, especially when I'm in a more mystical place myself. And so for me, sometimes that happens in kind of periods of time where my sense of openness and connectedness is more acute than other times. In 2009, I wrote a poem about my theology, which ended with these words. In the beginning was the Word, but more and more life flows through me from the place before words, where body to body we understand what it means to be human. Now, for those of you who may be less familiar with the Bible, in the beginning was the Word is the first word, or the first lines from the Gospel of John. And they continue, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. My experience of God, or of that creative mystery, is often wordless. For me, to be a mystic is to allow myself a vulnerable, unfiltered experience that transcends my usual boundaries of time, space, and communication with creation. It is an embodied, pre-verbal experience. This transcendence can involve sometimes a sudden awareness that drops, a sudden knowledge that drops into my awareness, and that often then continues with words, an enhanced capacity to communicate with other forms of creation, and a dropping of my separate self, as Gloria mentioned and as we heard in the words of Alan Watts. It is a vulnerable state for sure, because it defies what I and others have experienced as reality most of the time. It's a vulnerable state because it's talked about so infrequently, and because we, or I, can feel pretty weird sharing about these experiences. And it's a vulnerable state because many are harshly dismissive of it. And in our long history of there being mystics out there, some have even been exonerated and killed, martyred for their mystical experience. But as Alan Watts suggests, mysticism has been experienced by people and shared as best as possible with the limited faculty of words since the beginning of recorded history. So I'm going to invite you, what is invoked in you as I read some of these historical texts? From the early Buddhist text, the Sutra Nipata. As the flower blown out by the wind goes to rest and cannot be defined, so the wise human, freed from individuality, goes to rest and cannot be defined, gone beyond all images, gone beyond the power of words. From the 14th century English mystic, Julian of Norwich. And in this God showed me a little thing, the quantity of a hazelnut, laying in the palm of my hand as it seemed. And it was round as any ball. I looked upon it with the eyes of my understanding, and I thought, what may this be? And it was answered generally thus, it is all that is made. I marveled at how it might last, for I thought it might suddenly have fallen into nothing or littleness. And I was answered in my understanding, it lasts and ever shall, for God loves it. And so have all things their beginning in the love of God. From Black Elk, who is speaking of the Sioux chief Crazy Horse, who was a holy man of the Oglala Sioux. Crazy Horse dreamed and went into the world where there is nothing but the spirit of all things. That is the real world that is behind this one. And everything you see here is something like a shadow from that one. And from the contemporary Greek philosopher and mystic Alexis Karpouzos. The separate identity I attach to other humans and other things is but a convenient convention that facilitates my interaction with them. My family and my community are just as much me as the organs of my body. How do these sentiments ring true in your being? Do any of them resonate? And I can't speak about mystical experiences without a nod to the entheogenic experiences. That's a coined term by Houston Smith. Entheogenically literally means God-containing, and Houston Smith was a theologian who wrote an incredible book that I studied in seminary and is still being used called The World's Religions. But he also had mystical experiences that were substance-induced. And he called them entheogenic and God-containing instead of hallucinogenic, which he considered derogatory and inaccurate, or psychedelic, which he thought was too closely associated to the 1960s and recreational drug use. Houston Smith writes, "From the soles of my feet on, I found myself saying, yes, yes." The experience, he said, was not entirely pleasant. He described it often as strange, weird, uncanny, significant, and terrifying. Quite vulnerable. There's more research today about the potential positive effects of these induced states of heightened awareness, especially under supervision of a therapist. And some of my UU colleagues have developed their ministries in this area. So that's where we've seen kind of a sketch of the pervasiveness of mysticism in the world. And although it might not be apparent in our current, what did I call us before, God's frozen chosen practices, the way we do it, mysticism is actually very much aligned with our religious tradition. We, Unitarians and Universalists alike, have been the heretics, the outsiders on the religious front, always pushing the boundaries, questioning religious canon, and upending the power structures of orthodoxy. Our start as a distinctive American religious movement was in the early 1800s. The Calvinists of that day taught that humanity was fundamentally flawed and depraved and needed intermediaries to communicate with God and so that they could be saved. The Unitarians were much more optimistic about human nature, reveling in the power of the mind, and they split with the Congregationalists and the Calvinists around that point, around humans actually not being these depraved, awful little vermin. But then within a decade of that split was about 1825 or so, within a decade, there came this other movement just pushing us even further, the Transcendentalists, many of whom were connected to the Unitarian movement. While the Unitarians pushed towards a benevolent Godhead and the use of reason in religious thoughts, the Transcendentalists pushed against what Ralph Waldo Emerson called the formalism of the church instead calling on people to define their own experience of the divine, and especially within nature. In the 1840s, the transcendentalists were accused of being self-absorbed weirdos, threatening the newly formed, already marginal Unitarian tradition. Emerson, in particular, called upon people to use their intuition, a self-trusting process to create moral right action. Much of what he wrote was not deemed reasonable enough for the Unitarians. And so he quickly quit the pastorate. He was a Unitarian minister in a pulpit for about 3 years, and he left. He opposed the notion of a personal historical God. Instead, he saw the oversoul, which was a term he sometimes substituted for God, as the unifying force or energy, a structure in all things. So this was radical for the 1800s, the early 1800s, but not very different from what was being experienced in other parts of the world, or how many 20th century theologians began to talk about God, removing it from that personal anthropomorphized God. So here's some of our transcendentalist original words to describe their mystical experiences. And again, listen with your whole body and see how it resonates with you. From Ralph Waldo Emerson. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egoism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I seem all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am parcel of God. Describing a mystical experience he had when he was a youth, Henry David Thoreau wrote, I can remember how I was astonished. I said to myself and I said to others, there comes into my mind such an indescribable, infinite, all-absorbing, divine, heavenly pleasure, a sense of elevation and expansion, that I have had naught to do with it. I perceive that I am dealt with it by superior powers. This is a pleasure, a joy, an existence which I have not procured myself. I speak as a witness on the stand and tell what I have perceived. He continues in another writing, my profession is always to be on the alert to find God in nature, to know God's lurking places, to attend all the oratorios, the operas in nature, to watch for, describe all the divine features which I detect in nature. Lesser known today, but equally prolific in her writing, was Margaret Fuller, the transcendentalist. Here's one of her experiences. I saw there was no self, that selfishness was all folly and the result of circumstance, and that it was only because I thought of self real that I suffered, and that I only had to live in the idea of the all, and all was mine. This truth came to me, and I received it unhesitatingly, so that I was for that hour taken up into God. In that true ray, most of the relations of earth seemed mere film, mere phenomena. While they were maligned in their time, the transcendental movement which only formally lasted for about 20 years, was highly influential and impacted American theology, American culture, and Unitarian Universalism in general. We can see how the experiences of the transcendentalists have filtered through to today in our theology. Our first source, which was written about 150 years after the Transcendentalist movement faded away, calls Unitarian Universalists to this, to direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. My colleague, the late Reverend Suzanne Myers, says, the Transcendentalists speak out of our UU tradition to a postmodern mindset that is tired of scientism and reductionism, just as they were reacting against the Enlightenment rationalism of their day. They offer us a naturalist spirituality, a naturalist mysticism, without metaphysics and supernaturalism. So I invite you to hold on to that part of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, to allow your bodies, minds, and spirits to connect to whatever that is, that mystery that is beyond us, to have a whole, W-H-O-L-E, experience of life, to allow yourself to be open to those possibilities. I invite you into a time now of meditation, a time to engage your own intuitive, creative minds and imagination. As you go through the following meditation, try to set all expectations aside. The aim is simply to see what happens. And do everything to your own comfort level. Place your right hand over your heart center and your left hand just beneath your belly button. And if you're comfortable doing so, just gently close your eyes. Start to listen to and connect to your breath. Feel your breath as your body moves with every inhalation and exhalation. And just allow your breath to flow in and out at a comfortable pace for you. And now begin to imagine a light inside of you. What color is it? How bright is it? What's the temperature? Is it a cool light or warming in your body? This is your inner light, but it is not solely yours. You might imagine this light flowing up to you from the earth or coming down into you from the sky. And once you feel comfortable with this light, start to follow it as it moves around your body, perhaps with your breath, or perhaps just on its own. And then imagine it moving out into the world around you. And follow it as it swirls around this room, mingling with everything in its presence. Follow this light outside into nature, connecting with earth and sky. And allow yourself to feel safe and connected as this light moves within and among all things. And spend some time there, as much as you'd like, being open to whatever sensations may come to you. And when you're ready, bring this light back down into your own body and start to come back to this moment in this community, wiggling your fingers and your toes and adjusting to these surroundings. Mystery of mysteries. Connecting light of the universe. Creative energy that sustains us all. We are gathered in its embrace by no matter what names we call it. And we are gathered as a community of love, connection, hope, and endurance. On this day, we gather with concerns as well as joys, as always, for they are woven fine in each of our lives. Beloveds, if there's one thing that the mystical traditions teach us is that we are all so profoundly interconnected. What you do impacts all sorts of things in the world. May we do so with love then. May we do so with hope then. May we do so with light. The light that already shines within us. Blessed be. Amen.
We're going to share music once more today. Again, it will be in your gray hymnal. The number is 83, Winds Be Still. You are invited to rise in body or in spirit and join us. Again, the number is 83.
Well, I learned not to cough, and I'm glad I wasn't singing too loud, so apologies for that. So I have just a few announcements this morning. Each week we offer small group sessions. They're called the Inquirers Series. They help people get more connected to fellowship life. They will happen here in the sanctuary a few minutes after the service ends. This week's class is on affinity groups, which are those groups of kind of like-minded, or not like-minded, people with similar identities or that might want to meet together. It'll also include other ways to get involved. And next week's Inquirer series is a Q&A session with me. Today, I'll be teaching my in-person session of Faith Like a River from 11:30 to 1:30 in the Mountain View room. We'll have bagels and some snacks for those who come. There was no need to pre-register, although it will be helpful in the future. It does help us plan a little bit. That's all I have for announcements today. Isn't that great? Now I'm going to invite us, as I go up to extinguish the chalice, to rise and body your spirit. Hold hands as you are comfortable doing, or touch elbows, or cross your hands over your chest if you do not want to do this morning. And we will remember back to the times we were in. And join me in our words. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, or the energy of action. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. May we go forth in love and peace, remembering how profoundly interconnected we are. And just as that reminder, we have one more video for you all to dance around with, play around with. You might be familiar with it, or you might even recognize yourself in it. Here it comes.
I am, you are me. That's what I said. I am, you are me. Don't you see? I am, you are me. That's what I said. I am, you are me. Don't you see? I am, you are me. That's what I said. I am, you are me. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I am a part of you, you are a part of me, and so together we are one body. I am inside your head, you are inside my heart. We fit together, perfect from the start. I am, you are me. That's what I said. I am, you are me. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something between us that's greater than air. Don't you see? It's like I'm over here and you're over there. That's what I said. Something inside your head.